Hey everyone, how you doing? It's Liam from Push Chaos here, and I'm joined by my equally chaotic friend. It's Aaron. Hi Aaron, how you doing?
Hi Liam. I can't be here for very long because I've just finished killing chaos, and it's still very chaotic where I am. So there's sheds falling over, the wind's crashing, there's a storm outside. It's absolute chaos, if you can believe such a thing.
Sounds terrible. I also punched a sheep and it turned into a bunch of crystals, which is also something that just happens when you're fighting chaos, it seems.
That can happen. When you're leather clad and you've got your jabronis right behind you, you just want to punch things and crystals might shoot out. Has been known.
And who isn't in that situation in their lives? As we're implying here, we've been playing through the second trial version of Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins, the brand new game by Square Enix that's been developed by Neo developer Team Ninja. They've just released the second demo. We thought we'd have a crack at it, and we're here to give you some of our thoughts in the medium of video and audio. So before we start, Aaron, that was a very smooth transition, wasn't it? You can tell I'm good at this. What is your history with Souls games, the Neo series, and also Final Fantasy as a whole?
So before I dive into any of that, I just want to say, nice one, patting yourself on the back there, because you did deserve it. That was a very smooth transition. But no,
too kind.
In terms of, it'd be a shame if someone were to mention that and call you up on it. No, in terms of my previous history with Final Fantasy, it has been very scattered, very brief, if I'm being honest. So my first main Final Fantasy game that I played was Final Fantasy X back in the PS2 era. Got deep into the throes of Blitzball, enjoyed that a lot. And then I kind of didn't leave it. Well, I left it kind of until the PS3 age where we got onto Final Fantasy 13. Didn't really jive with me for all the reasons that people most likely know about. Corridor City, Corridor Central.
One long corridor.
Exactly. Just taking me back to my, secondary school days. Corridor this, corridor that. And then I kind of picked up Final Fantasy 15, enjoyed what I played, but kind of dropped off halfway through just because that open world was kind of like the anti-open world. You had to go here, there, and everywhere, but it was very sort of almost linear in how you would get there. It wasn't really fun to explore. And then in terms of the Souls-like sort of games side of things, just a complete novice, complete amateur, made the mistake of reviewing The Surge 2 once a couple years ago, and I've regretted it ever since. You'll never catch me, with a bionic arm with a chainsaw attached to it ever again, because I'm just so bad at these games. But what about you, Liam? You a big Final Fantasy guy?
Well, not quite. So my Final Fantasy journey began on PlayStation 1. I had a copy of Final Fantasy 8 that I played through with my pal, and for a long time I was one of those people that used to say, oh, well, Final Fantasy 8 is the superior PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy game. Even though I'd never played Final Fantasy 7, but, I was a teenager, whatever. We like to be controversial, don't we? And then I never played a Final Fantasy game until Final Fantasy X, played it for an hour, didn't really care much for it. I did play 15 for about 4 hours, and I was like, yep, not for me either. But then I played Final Fantasy VII Remake last year, despite having no nostalgia for the original, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I rinsed that game, I got super into it, and I came away wanting more and desperate to see what this series has in store for me. And it's nice to think you've got, over 30 years worth of games to jump back into. So I recently picked up Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age on PlayStation 4. I'm excited to waste 100 hours of my life digging around in that.
I hear good things about Final Fantasy XII. Like, people liken it almost to like the prequel era of Star Wars in terms of like the politics and sort of all the different characters. Yeah.
Except good, I think, is what
people... That is the main point of difference for sure.
In terms of Souls games, I'm bad at them. I buy every single one. I play it for 2 hours. I die repeatedly. And I think to myself, yeah, I don't know why I keep doing this. And I'll do it again. I'll do it with Elden Ring. And it keeps happening. So we've played the demo. We've both spent a considerable amount of time. I played about an hour and a half of it. Did you play much of it?
Yeah, I'd say I played around about an hour. Got to the end boss of the first mission.
Yeah. And you got to tell me those thoughts. What did you think of this demo?
So I'll come right out and say that I don't think I liked it, but it did surprise me in terms of how much I didn't mind it. And I know that might be an odd thing to say, because it's kind of like I didn't find it offensive almost. But when you're coming in with such low expectations as I am, I think that's kind of like the best you can hope for. Someone who is kind of like a Souls-like novice, or kind of, cowers at the thought of having to get in and get out and block and defense in such, such a short space of time. But what I will say is that I think it's so it plays to its audience, Final Fantasy Origin, and it knows exactly what it wants to be. There's lots of Neo DNA in the thing, so I think if you've played those games, you'll be right at home here. But in terms of the overall world, I do have my problems with it. The characters are a bit surface level, because I'm someone who likes and enjoys a great story in games. And when the story of a particular game just comes down to the lead character screaming chaos every couple of scenes, I think, maybe my time is better served elsewhere. But from a pure mechanical and systems driven level, again, there are things that I don't want to see in my action games, but I will say that it's scratching that very specific itch that Souls-like fans just can never seem to get enough of, it would appear.
Yeah, I would say in terms of the systems and the mechanics, it feels more like how Jedi Fallen Order was a Souls game, in that it took a lot of elements from those games and applies them in a more action RPG style way, if that makes any sense. It definitely didn't feel as considered or as precise as a From Software game. It felt a little bit messy, but I like that. I thought it being more action focused gave the combat a bit of brutality. It made it more enjoyable, more fun. It's definitely more forgiving. It certainly didn't kick my ass as much as a Souls game would. I felt like I had more of an opportunity to progress, which is something I often don't find with Souls games. I picked up Sekiro for a video about 3 months ago and couldn't get past the first area because it was just so intense, and I feel like the intensity isn't really here with is it Final Fantasy Origins? A Final Fantasy Origin?
So I'm looking at the Wikipedia page now, if you can trust it, and it's Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, because there are two words there where you could trip yourself up in terms of pluralization: Strangers and Origin. So it's just singular throughout the whole thing. Yeah.
Who names these games, honestly?
I don't know, but do you want to, while we're on the subject, you told me something off air about how I almost said Strange Enix then, how Square Enix names its titles. Go on, tell the audience, tell the lovely Push Square viewers your theory about that.
Oh, my beautiful theory that this isn't definitely the second time we've recorded this video because of audio issues, so I will definitely act like this is the first time you've asked me. I have a theory, right? Because the names of Square Enix games are so ridiculous that they must just have someone that they keep locked in a basement underneath the Tokyo Square Enix offices. And every 3 years, a CEO wanders down, he flings open the door, and he goes, "Oi, name." And this person wakes up, and they go, "Project Triangle Strategy." And the person goes, "All right," and slams the door. Because who else is naming someone who exists in the real world? Doesn't come up with a name like Octopath Traveler or Stranger of Paradise. So I want that job though. If they can hire me to live in a basement in Tokyo and come up with names, I would love that.
What I like about this nightmarish scenario that you've constructed is that, from a certain perspective, it's almost like this guy trunders down once a year and he's asking the poor guy who's chained up, his own name, and he's just throwing out until he gets it right. He's like, I can't remember who he is. He's like, Octopath Traveler. Bless him. Anyway, he might get out one day, who knows? But he's done an excellent job naming Final Fantasy Origin in the meantime, kind of.
Stranger of Paradise. So if we talk a bit about the mechanics and how I found, from a mechanical level, the game throws too many systems at you.
100%.
There's so much that this game throws at you. Even though it has like a dedicated tutorial area where you're in like a field of wheat fighting goblins, which sounds like a sleep paralysis nightmare I would have. Even though it gives you the basics, it doesn't give you everything. And then when you actually start the first level, it seems to throw like a million more mechanics at you, and then still continues to do so for the entirety of the demo. There's so many different aspects. There's a lot of depth to this system. And how did you find that? How did you find the amount of mechanics the game wants you to use?
So I'm right there with you in that there is certainly a lot of them, and it is quite ironic that you complete the tutorial sequence and you think, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'm surrounded by a lovely field of wheat. Sting would be loving it. But you're thrown into the kind of first mission, and it still keeps hammering you with these sort of menus and orange orbs, and there's a lot to take in, and you've got such a short space of time to kind of comprehend it. And But I feel like my issue with the mechanics, if indeed you would call it an issue, can all be distilled in this sort of, I believe they call it the soul shield system, where
Yes.
in the starter tutorial area, you're told how to block and parry. And, in most sort of games, I think God of War does this, where they kind of use the shoulder buttons for their main like combat and defensive maneuvers. You use L1 just before the enemy strikes to kind of, parry the attack. Where so you do that in the tutorial area. It tells you about the soul shield system there as well. But as soon as you're in game, the standard parry is just basically useless, and it expects you to use this sort of soul shield system, which you deploy by pressing circle. And I find that to be much more effective because, for my first 10-15 minutes with it, I was getting my ass handed to me, which is, to be fair, usually the case in terms of games of this ilk. But here it just didn't seem to be working. I was running through health potions, just like no one's business. And then it was only when I stopped using L1 to parry and instead used the soul shield system to do it, wherein after you've completed a successful parry using that, you've got this kind of short time window where if you press square, you can kind of reflect and attack back at that enemy. That's where it kind of started to begin to click with me. But having said that, on top of that, you've got all the different jobs, which basically affects the different weapons, which affects all the different armor sets. There's just a lot going on here. You've got like break gauge and so many things to take in. But it's kind of it's usually the type of thing where I kind of like to distance myself and cower away from. But if you're a fan of Souls-likes, if you played Nioh and you know Team Ninja's work with that, I imagine you're going to lap this up. I did start to enjoy it and get the game more than I thought I would towards the end, and I eventually came up against Chaos, or at least a version of him. But up until that point, I found it very overwhelming, I think's the right word.
Agreed. I also found it very overwhelming. As someone who tends to lean more towards simplistic, maybe action games. I'm a big fan of Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, things like that. But games like this, system-heavy games, are quite often very off-putting, like you say. What I found halfway through the demo, there was a room with like a couple of skeletons in, and I was struggling to kind of get past them. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm right next to a bonfire, for want of a better term. It's like some weird crystally thin, isn't it?
Save point.
Resets enemies, the usual Souls-like stuff. I was like, okay, I'm going to try and kill these skeletons, and I'm really going to try and just experiment with the systems, experiment with the job classes, and basically jobs are classes in this game, aren't they? They are different character builds. And one of the interesting things about this game is that you can swap between two of them at any point. So even halfway through a fight. In fact, there's even a mechanic to break out of a combo to swap to a different job and then do a counter attack. I think this idea of swapping between two completely different character builds is built into the actual combat system flow, as it were, which is interesting.
But did you find that you always wanted more than the two? Because I'm not giving up my Buster Sword, and that's kind of the standard class it kind of gives you to start off with. Then you're given this sort of new magic ability, which I also think plays quite awkwardly, because you're having to, use both analog sticks to target the enemy, then target where you want that area of water.
I didn't like that,
Yeah, very just cumbersome. But then obviously the third one it kind of teaches you about is the lance ability, where you throw it at enemies from a distance. And I don't know, certain games, it's like, and this is a very PlayStation reference here, but this is like from when we went from Resistance 1 to Resistance 2. Where in Resistance 1 we had the whole weapon wheel to play with, and in Resistance 2 we had to switch between two guns. So obviously this is only a beta, it's a very nitpicky problem, but I would have liked, and maybe it would be too much, but I would have liked to switch the ability to switch between three different jobs on the fly, at least. I don't know.
Oh, you see, I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like there was so much going on.
There is.
You've got each job that you can swap between. You can even do things like each job has different armor sets, each job has different combos, each job has different abilities. I think maybe managing 3 would maybe feel a bit too much. I think having 2 gives you the opportunity, considering games like this normally you just have one class. You start a Souls game, you select your one class and then you're stuck with it for the entire game, is my understanding. Maybe someone's going to come in the comments and say, well, if you pick up the tooth of the ancient baron from the barrel and this side bit, you can change class at the well of healing or whatever. I don't understand Souls games. They sound like nonsense to me. But I kind of liked it. I kind of liked how just the 2 was a good enough balance to get a lot of depth in the combat system, but still, not be too overwhelming.
I agree with you, but Ghost of Tsushima, you have 4 different stances that you can kind of switch between.
Very, very good point. Yes, and that was good. And that was good to balance against different enemies, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I will concede that you're right. And I will be writing a letter to Tetsuya Nomura. And I'll be saying, Dear Mr. Nomura, I would like to select between 3 classes, please.
Have you thought about changing your game like this? That's not what we're saying. But having said that, like, yeah, you said this is the second trial demo. I'm sure they're taking on feedback, which they actually did with the Neo games, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And that directly impacted
they did
them.
actual demos, not just
betas. I know.
Actual demos, yeah.
Well, speaking of demos, and we used to get them back in the day. I know you've got some strong thoughts about the kind of aesthetic and sort of the kind of visual style we've got here.
Yeah, I think this is such an important thing to talk about. So visually, this game looks like garbage. And I don't just mean aesthetically, I think is what I'm trying to say, more so than just visually. I think it's so stuck in early 2000s PS2 era game design.
Definitely.
In the main characters. The fact the main character is just a guy called Jack. Just a terrible, awful name for a main character. The fact he's just wearing chinos and trainers when you start the game. Admittedly, you get equipment very quickly where you start to look more like a Final Fantasy protagonist. But certainly in my game, one of my friends, Jed, I think his name was.
Jed.
I kept forgetting their names. He was wearing chinos and a muscle-fit t-shirt from Primark for the entire time I was playing this game. And he looked rancid.
Hey, if I know one thing about Jed, in the hour I've spent with him, he doesn't shop at Primark. Oh, no.
No, you think it was like a Hollister?
He's
t-shirt,
a Hollister kind of guy, I reckon.
He looked like a Hollister man, didn't he? I think loads of people are going to play this game and they're going to bounce off the flat 2-dimensional characters, the rancid storyline, which is effectively, is that chaos? I don't think that's chaos, mate. Well, I think it might be chaos. Well, all right, maybe it is chaos then. Let's continue. And that was the entire narrative development we saw in this demo. I think people will bounce off all that, but for me, an aficionado of mid-tier games from the early 2000s, I really fell head over heels for this, and I'm really excited to play more. And I'm aware that it's not good. I don't think it doesn't stick to modern game design principles in terms of character, visual design. I think the gameplay is very modern, actually. I would say that I was very taken. Once it clicked for me, I really did enjoy playing the game. But visually, it's so outdated. But I really liked it. What did you think of Jack and Co?
So Jack, Jed, and Ash, it was the worst of times, it was the best of times, trying to kill chaos and countless skeletons and bats. I don't think bats have ever caused as much of an issue for me in games before. Like whenever I've explored the local Cheddar Caves and I'm looking at all the stalactites, stalagmites, and bat flies past, I've never had to try and one-shot it with a lance, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, they just kept kicking my ass. In terms of the visuals, you're absolutely right. I can see this game kind of really jiving with people, a certain sect of kind of high schoolers back in the mid-2000s that were into, shall we say, 30 Seconds to Mars, all these sorts of bands. Linkin Park, maybe. Why did that band came to mind? I'll let you guess.
Well, because there's a cutscene in this game. You know what? Let's just roll. No, we probably shouldn't roll the cutscene because we'll get copyright struck. There is a cutscene in this where you kill Chaos, and Jack, he says a naughty swear, Aaron. He does a swear in a Final Fantasy game, and
because he's an adult, Leo.
Oh, he is an adult.
That's how you know.
He's not a teenager. He's an adult. He's an angry man. He pulls out his little Samsung Galaxy S8 or whatever it is, and he presses play, and he plays approximately 23 seconds of a Linkin Park song, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then he wanders out and turns it off, and it is embarrassingly funny, and I loved it.
I mean, Square Enix kind of already had this with the whole Chaos thing when they released the first trailer. So the fact that this game keeps going viral for, I don't want to say all the wrong reasons, people are definitely like, because you're either going to love that stuff or you're going to hate it. And like in the little time I've spent with this game, it's very superficial, very on the nose, knows exactly what it wants to be, and it's kind of not willing to shy away from that. And I almost respect it, because no other game is doing this sort of grungy punk rock aesthetic these days.
They're certainly not doing it completely poor-faced. This game wants to be this. And it is at no point self-aware of what it is. It wants to be this. It thinks it's great. And even playing something with no hint, to be able to get your main character to pull out a mobile phone and play a rap rock song from 15 years ago and not play it intentionally for laughs is fascinating.
And I tell you what else is fascinating is that this game supposedly takes place close to the timeline of where the original Final Fantasy take place. And I'm sure that, diehard fans of the original Final Fantasy would just love the thought of Linkin Park playing over all those sequences from that game. But no, I guess the idea is that they've been pulled into this universe, so they might have like modern day tech. And I kind of like the idea that they're holding their cards close to their chest, because there has to be more than just Jack the lad wanting to kill Chaos.
Well, I've just Googled Garland there out of curiosity, and Garland is the main bad guy from the original Final Fantasy.
Ah, okay.
Which I didn't realize. So that's very interesting.
So this isn't... So Jack Garland, we're talking about, the main protagonist here.
Oh my god. You're right. I'm looking there. Jack... No, the guy, the knight, Chaos, who you fight, is the warrior Garland. But you're right. Main character, Jack, his last name is Garland.
There's some family business
so funny.
About to go down in this game. And it's all going to go down.
I wonder what the twist's going to be here, Aaron. That main character, Jack Garland.
Not so much a stranger of paradise after all, it would seem.
Oh, I'm more excited for the rubbish this game's going to throw at me.
Anyway, like, while we're kind of talking about how this game looks, I didn't want to end this discussion before talking about performance, because supposedly there are 2 modes in which you're able to play this game on PlayStation 5. I did opt for performance, but gosh darn it, this is... It's struggling technically, shall we say. Had the game even crash on me at one point, like quite far away from a checkpoint, bonfire,
really?
Whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it was that bit where you have to like fight 3 flowers at once, and they keep on, spawning those pesky bats. Eventually did it, smashed down the tower, and I was walking across the tower, and I think it was Ash that said something to the effect of, "Okay, we're almost here. We're almost coming to the end," like super nod and wink kind of thing. And then it was like, PlayStation 5, hard crash. Do you want to submit a report?
Really?
Yeah. So that
your PlayStation has great comedic timing, let's be fair. It's very funny.
I mean, if you're going to crash at any point, why not crash then? But in addition to that, like, it was so framey. And I'm wondering if it was the same for you.
Yeah, no, performance... I mean, it's a demo, right? It comes out in March. They've still got a few months left to polish. And as we know, the last few months of development are normally when a company will focus on things like performance. So I do genuinely believe that this game will probably launch with a performance mode that actually does stick to a consistent frame rate.
Hopefully.
But there was some real issues with performance in this demo, and really it was more of like a frame pacing issue. I think, as people will be able to see from the footage in the background, the frames are dropping it's like it's missing every 30th frame or something. It's chugging along constantly.
Yeah. You'd know it when you saw it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, visually I think the game just looks rotten. I don't think it's a nice thing to look at. The second level especially, the first level is very grungy and very brown and grey, very early PS3 game aesthetically. The second level just looked super washed out. You were swapping between rain and sunshine, and the rain looked super grainy and washed out, and the sunshine looked really overblown and terrible. It just didn't look like visually a very nice game. But again, it's kind of an aesthetic I really dig. I was excited to see something like this that exists. And we've already talked about this outside of this chat. Isn't it just nice that Square Enix are putting money into something that's just different?
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, as you know, this isn't designed to be a mainstream game. It's designed for a very specific audience. And like I said earlier, I think they're gonna, take to it like catnip, basically. And I think you're right. The fact that they're pouring so much money, trusting a team like Team Ninja, who have already proved themselves before with something like Neo, and then lending them the Final Fantasy license name, even it's the creme de la creme of the Square Enix catalog, and they're unafraid to do something different with it. It's almost like it's
creme de la creme. Don't you mean Barlan Wonderworld? I'm pretty sure that's the creme de la creme of Square Enix's catalog.
I thought you were going to say Chaos de la Chaos then, and I also would have agreed.
What a very nice reference. Sorry, go on. I rudely interrupted you there with a bad joke.
No, you're all right. It was worth it. No, I can definitely see this. Not that this is what any developer ever hopes for, but I can see this swiftly becoming a cult classic. And if it does well enough, it's the kind of thing I can see easily getting a sequel, because Souls-like players,
really,
they're never done punishing themselves. Yeah, I really do.
Very true.
So it might be too early to say, and obviously, as me and you have discussed, there's definitely a lot of polish that needs to be done between now and March. But if they get that done, and the story is marginally decent, and the game goes viral when it releases, as it seems to do every time it shows its face.
I think it will.
Yeah. Give us a Stranger of Paradise 2. Yeah, why not?
Big words. I like that a lot. All right, so let's just wrap this up then, Aaron. What do you think? Are you curious to try this out when it comes out, or do you think you'll wait until reviews?
So, unlike you, I've played enough by now. I know this isn't the game that's going to like scratch what I look for in games: story, simplistic but great feeling gameplay, and just an interesting world to explore. Because obviously, this is another hallmark of the Souls-like games. For as open and as many shortcuts as you can open within the levels themselves, they are still quite linear. And I did find myself getting frustrated. Like every time you had to walk through that sequence with the wolves, like there's a conveniently placed smashed pillar. That means you can't. And there's no jump button in this game, so you have to kind of it forces you through the.
There was just one route, wasn't there?
Yeah, very much so. So. In short, this game isn't for me, but I can definitely see it doing well and it being a game for a certain type of player. What about you? Did this win you over the demo?
Yeah, I think it did. I think I went in with zero expectations. I know that literally yesterday we said to each other, "Oh, should we play this and do a discussion? Should we just see how it goes?" And I went in with zero expectations, and I came out, I would say, cautiously optimistic for the March release. I think there's something here that really, it's not super polished. It's rough around the edges. It's a bit odd. And I kind of always gravitate towards the kind of cult classic style games. So yeah, I'm interested. I guess I'll be doing the review for the channel if it sounds like I can probably confidently put my name down for that. Well, I think that probably wraps it up then, Aaron. So thank you so much for joining me. And it's been a pleasure to have a chat with you about Jack and his chaotic exploits. If you enjoyed this video, people at home, please do consider giving it a like, and why not let us know in the comments if you've played the demo, what you think, are you excited for its full release in March. Subscribe to the channel. I haven't done my usual way of wrapping up videos. I put comments after like, and now I can't remember how I normally say subscribe. Please subscribe for more PlayStation stuff. It's not what I normally say, but we'll run with it. And what I will say, I want to give a little bit of shout out to my friend Aaron here, who's been doing great stuff for the channel. Make sure you check it out. He did a great video about Nintendo games coming to PlayStation on Friday. Get that watched. It's brilliant. And we will see you next time. Thank you again, Aaron. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.